We now proceed to Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Prosecutor General, for being here. It's going to be hard for any of us to hold the sovereign nation of Russia or its leader accountable. We need to try and do that. In the meantime, what we can do is make sure that we are on our best behavior. And as you probably know, in America, yesterday was tax day. Americans are forced to send in their hard-earned dollars, oftentimes for things they don't agree with. It's in total about $30 billion in humanitarian aid that we have sent to Ukraine. And I just want to run through a series of dates.
The Chronicles of Corruption will delve into the dark corners of power and deceit, unearthing the true contents of the infamous Hunter Biden laptop. The revelations contained within its digital confines are not merely the tawdry escapades of an addict, but rather they stand as a testament to the intricate web of clandestine dealings that have ensnared our alleged elected leaders, state and federal agencies, foreign NGOs, multinational corporations, foreign companies, foreign agencies, and even entire nations. The laptop's contents lay bare the pervasive corruption that has infected our democratic republic. Elected officials, once thought to be the steadfast guardians of our liberties, have exploited their positions of power using backdoor deals to line their pockets with taxpayer dollars. In their unquenchable thirst for wealth, they have negotiated away pieces of our national sovereignty encapsulated in the obscure language of memorandums of understandings and bilateral agreements. These seemingly innocuous documents are in reality the threads that weave together a tapestry of corruption, shaping our foreign policy to serve not the public good, but rather the private gains of those in power. Even today, we witness the unsavory spectacle of politicians clamoring for war, their pockets swelling with profits from the investments in defense behemoths like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. They're all buying up the stock right now. The military-industrial complex, that ever-looming shadow over our democratic republic, finds willing accomplices among those who claim to serve us.
Age 48, children 4, married. Fortune roughly €1 billion. Nickname King of Chocolate. His mission: win Ukraine's presidential election. A discreet figure during the Ukrainian uprising that ended the last presidency, Poroshenko has quite a few of his pro-Europe countrymen and women convinced that he is worthy.
Problem, reaction, solution. This is a strategy in which the problem is intentionally created or exploited, leading to a public reaction that demands a solution. The solution that is then offered often involves changes or actions that might not have been accepted without the initial problem.
Or is it to get to the truth? Because if it's to get to the truth, Hunter Biden can't tell us anything about the withholding of the military funding. Hunter Biden can't tell us why the president wouldn't let the president of Ukraine into the Oval Office.
I beg to differ. Hunter Biden's laptop explains exactly why he wasn't allowed into the Oval Office.
The UK Serious Fraud Office froze $23 million of a guy named Zlochevsky's assets. He was in charge of Burisma. On April 13th of 2014, there was Hunter Biden said the contract should start now, not after the upcoming visit of my guy, his guy being the Vice President of the United States.
Hey folks, Joe Biden. I just got off a 8-9 hour flight from Washington to the capital of Ukraine. People, every one of them, gave their life for freedom. Every single one of these people here, ordinary Ukrainians. This government has an obligation to not let this fail this time. The Orange Revolution failed. Orange Revolution failed. What happened in the Maidan and up on this hill can't fail. The Orange Revolution failed. Up on this hill can't fail. Up on this hill can't fail. The Orange Revolution failed.
In 2013, there were protests in Ukraine referred to as the Euromaidan movement, or the Revolution of Dignity. The initial protests began on November 21st, 2013. This came on the heels of then-President Viktor Yanukovych announcing that Ukraine would not sign an association agreement with the European Union, opting instead to strengthen ties with Russia. This decision angered the Western nations. It was seen as a reversal of the government's previous commitment to the European integration and sparked demonstrations in Kiev's Independence Square. In December of 2013, the protests expanded in scale and scope in response to police brutality against demonstrators.
The security service of Ukraine had evidence that on that night, Lovochkin was in contact with opposition leader Yatsenyuk, where they discussed the clearing of Maidan. News media reported that the riot police cruelly attacked the students peacefully sleeping in their tents, but scenes from the event seem to tell a different story. It appears that the protesters were waiting for the police. Additionally, there were dozens of journalists and cameramen from all the new public TV news outlets prepared to cover the events. And most ominously, a group of well-trained young men arrived to Maidan.
Where have we seen that before? Remember George Floyd?
Protesters marched amidst a river of torch.
The demands of protesters grew to include calls for the resignation of then-President Yanukovych and his government. Between January and February of 2014, the protests reached their heights in the winter months, with hundreds of thousands of people participating. Sounds like the winter of love. We had the summer of love in 2020. President Yanukovych fled the capital. The next day, the Ukrainian parliament voted to remove him from office. The Euromaidan protest represented a pivotal movement in Ukraine's history, reflecting a clear choice by a significant portion of the Ukrainian population to either pursue a pro-European path or that of the Russian Federation. President Petro Poroshenko. He was an active supporter of the Euromaidan movement. His actual television channel sounds familiar. Didn't Zelensky have a media company? He was an actor.
Promptly to deliver on an aid package, including a $1 billion loan guarantee that can help smooth the path for reform inside of Ukraine and give the Prime Minister and his government the capacity to do what they need to do as they are also organizing an election process.
Petro Poroshenko, age 48, children 4, married.
During the riots, Poroshenko was seen on the streets of Kiev handing out food to rioters and protesters and giving speeches in support of the movement. He used the momentum from the Euromaidan protests to launch a successful campaign for the presidency, ultimately winning the presidential election in May 2014 with over 50% of the vote in the first round. Don't forget, in April of 2014, it was Barack Hussein Obama that signed a bill offering money to Ukraine to help usher elections. Did I mention that they stopped counting in the middle of the night? And in the morning, Poroshenko won. Sound familiar? And once again, the grand chessboard of history is one set, and the puppeteer's string reach far and wide, intertwining the fates of nations and rewriting the script of reality. We have seen how the puppeteers maneuvered Poroshenko into power, manipulating the Euromaidan movement and exploiting the chaos and instability it wrought upon Ukraine, and then dangling IMF money as bait to have their way. Fast forward to the United States in 2020, a tumultuous year marked by the tragic death of George Floyd, the resulting BLM riots, and contentious elections. The death of George Floyd and the subsequent BLM riots were not just spontaneous reactions to racial injustice. Instead, they were part of a carefully orchestrated plot by the puppeteers to sow discord and chaos, mirroring the Euromaidan movement. The streets of American cities like those in Ukraine were set ablaze as the puppeteers pulled the strings from behind the curtain. The 2020 election, much like Poroshenko's victory, was a crucial chess move in the puppeteers' game. With the nation divided and in turmoil, the puppeteers exploited the situation to place their chosen candidate in power, with promises of peace and stability. But here we are, all we have is war and inflation. Just as Obama and Biden offered IMF money to the Ukraine with strings attached, the puppeteers used the promise of unity and change as bait to control the narrative and outcome of the election. As the curtain falls, the puppeteers' strings fade into the shadows, leaving behind a trail of manipulated events and altered histories. The echoes of their influence reverberate through the corridors of power, serving as a chilling reminder of the lengths to which the puppeteers will go to shape the course of history.
In a country where business
to their
elites
will.
are often seen as corrupt, the presidential candidate has called corruption the top priority for a modern Ukraine.
February 21st, 2014. Amidst the elections, puppeteers in the shadows tried to weave their narrative. Promises were made, funds were offered, and strings were attached. A nation's future hung in the balance, manipulated by unseen hands, just as Ukraine had experienced years prior. And as the dust settled on the U.S. election, just like in Ukraine, questions lingered. Whose hand pulled the strings? Whose voice truly mattered? The events in Ukraine and the USA stood side by side, two mirror reflections in the turbulent waters of history.
10 days later or thereabouts, Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor general, was fired. May 13th of 2016, Joe Biden, the president now, vice president then, tells President Poroshenko that $1 billion in loan guarantees would be forthcoming.
I'm going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority, you're not the president. The president said, I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion.
And then in the intervening time, then Vice President Biden went before the Council on Foreign Relations and announced that I told him they had to fire the prosecutor general, or they went.
I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch.
To get the loan guarantees, and what do you know, son of a bitch, the prosecutor was fired.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch.
And then on 2020, in April of 2020, Viktor Shokin was formally recorded as the victim of an alleged crime by former Vice President Joe Biden. In 2019, one of your predecessors as Prosecutor General announced a reinvestigation into Burisma.
Was that Prosecutor Luchenko? Why was Sally Painter so adamant to bring him to the United States, and why did she so blatantly lie, saying she doesn't represent Burisma or Mykolai Zlochevsky?
and some of their high-level employees. The Prosecutor General was reopening and auditing criminal cases that his office believed had been mishandled or that the conduct of the previous offices had not been proper. Since that time, it has been announced that those investigations have been put on hold because of the inability to locate the former CEO of Burisma. But we probably can locate Hunter Biden.
Hunter Biden's not impossible to find. I found him on Plum Island in Massachusetts.
Mr. Custon, what is your office's position that Burisma needs further investigation, and will you commit to investigating Burisma to the full extent, no matter what pushback you get and no matter who you need to call as a witness, including Americans that might be involved in the corruption and malfeasance and loss and theft of taxpayer money in your country?
So I am not entitled at the moment to give you more information about this case, as our committee hearing are related to war crimes. And with regard to all financial aid we receive, I have mentioned our 2 latest achievements on the level on our work against fighting against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
But then when that laptop failed to materialize during the impeachment trial, I realized that the FBI cared more about protecting the Bidens than they cared about the truth or protecting me, for that matter.
As the coordinator of chaos amid a cacophony of inaccurate and misleading reports, it's crucial to lay a solid foundation by delving into the underlying currents and undertones emitted by this laptop. The device in question is not merely a storage unit of digital information. It acts as Pandora's box. Once open, reveals a web of entangled narratives and hidden agendas that have shaped and continue to influence the global political landscape. The importance of unearthing the covert and overt dynamics at play cannot be overstated, as they are pivotal to understanding the full scope of events in question. The analysis of the events in Ukraine is crucial to comprehending why there is a portrayed unclear chain of custody surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop. There is clear evidence that the FBI was conducting investigations, as evidenced by the raid on Hunter Biden's legitimate ketamine supplier and psychiatrist, which occurred months after the laptop was obtained by the authorities. Furthermore, Sally Painter was interviewed in the summer of 2020, coinciding with the mysterious disappearance of my entire server. The whereabouts of my cybercrime report also still remain unknown. These occurrences are indicative of an attempt to shield the actions of both the former President of the United States, Barack Hussein Obama, and the former Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, who is currently the President of the United States. It is a concealment of potentially corrupt endeavors. This situation raises significant questions about the integrity of the federal agencies involved and their potential role in altering the narrative to protect the interests of powerful individuals. Now, if I were ever to ascend to the presidency, I would feel compelled to ask and question to the extent which the elected officials and federal agencies of my country might have manipulated and altered the history and desires of a sovereign nation like Ukraine. Such actions, if proven true, would represent a severe breach of trust and an affront to the principles that are supposed to underpin our society. Therefore, the call with Zelensky was 100% merited.
Impeachment for that? When you have a wonderful meeting or you have a wonderful phone conversation?
In the intelligence community, every action, every word has weight and intention. Intent. When 50 intelligence officials, a staggering number by any measure, declare the vice president's son's laptop as Russian disinformation, one must pause and ask why.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what...
Are they guardians of the nation's secrets or gatekeepers of their own transgressions?
The path to renewed prosperity runs through the International Monetary Fund.
Perhaps they see their reflection in the deeds they so quickly label as foreign manipulation. They themselves could be the architects, or at the very least, the enablers allowing these actions while turning a blind eye.
Burisma Holdings partners the USAID Best Energy Efficiency Publication Contest.
And let's not forget, Barack Hussein Obama's convenient appointments of Biden to the delegations in those very regions where his son sought influence is not just coincidental. It's strategic. As a private intelligence contractor, I've learned that the most intricate webs are often the ones that are woven right under our noses. The true art of deception isn't in just hiding the truth, but boldly presenting it as a lie.
Over the past few days, President Trump has highlighted a report by the New York Post about Hunter Biden.
Yeah, we need to talk about it, Nicole. This looks like Russian intelligence. This walks like Russian intelligence. This talks like Russian intelligence.
Jeremy Bash has been an unwavering pillar of support, not for the American people, but for the machinations of the government's intelligence agenda. As Chief of Staff at the Central Intelligence Agency and later at the U.S. Department of Defense under Barack Hussein Obama, Bash was a perfectly positioned influence.
This effort by Rudy Giuliani and the New York Post and Steve Bannon to cook up supposed dirt on Joe Biden looks like a classic Russian playbook disinformation campaign.
His dedication wasn't to the masses, but to the covert operations and strategies that served a select few.
We have 4 days left, and all of a sudden there's a laptop. There's overwhelming evidence that from the intelligence community that the Russians are engaged. There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
That's exactly what.
Is this where you're
exactly what.
The New York Post reported on the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, alleging he used his father's position for personal gain, a claim the president's son has denied. Less than a week later, more than 50 former intelligence officials released a statement that the laptop had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation.
Was that your laptop?
For real, I don't know.
I know, but you know I
really don't know.
You didn't drop off a laptop to be repaired in Delaware?
Not that I remember at all.
April 12th, 2019, Hunter Biden came into my shop for a data recovery. And I find it really hard to believe that after all this time, he still doesn't remember, because his lawyer remembered. His lawyer called me up the day before or the night before the New York Post ran the story, and they wanted the laptop back.
You were hired by Hunter Biden to recover data that was on this laptop. Is that accurate?
Yes. During the check-in procedure, it's customary for me to ask for the first name, the last name, collect an email address and a phone number. When I got to the customer's last name, there was a pause, and he seemed surprised that I did not recognize him.
And you noticed a sticker on one of the laptops from Hunter's brother, is that correct? And you're in Wilmington, so you know the Biden family, they loom large in that area. So you were able to sort of connect the dots, is that accurate?
Rather quickly.
John Paul McIsaac, a Wilmington-based small business owner specializing in Mac repairs, found himself in an unexpected situation when Hunter Biden, a client, brought 3 laptops for repair. Leaving one with Isaac for data recovery, Isaac then worked to recover data from the unstable machine after being provided with the necessary password.
The process that I was hired to perform was a data recovery, and the machine was not stable. So in the process of transferring the data, it's a good idea to verify the data, that the data transfer correctly, so that you can call the customer and get paid for it. So that process, you have to review data. In that process, that's when I saw some things that were questionable.
Upon completing the recovery, Hunter mysteriously disappeared, failing to retrieve his laptop or pay for the service. Then, triggering a policy Hunter had signed that deemed the laptop abandoned after 90 days of client inactivity, making it John Paul McIsaac's property. Having observed some material during the transfer, Isaac was very uncomfortable with the laptop in his possession. The device contained compromising material, including videos of Hunter's illicit drug use and communications suggestive of pay-for-play schemes in Ukraine. Fearing the potential implications, Isaac made the decision to hand over the concerning data to the FBI.
So you have this information. Nobody's come back to retrieve this laptop. Nobody's paid you for this this service. How concerned were you that you needed to get this laptop into the right hands, or at least just out of your shop? Take us through that.
Well, as the summer progressed, I started to recognize names and events and situations in the media that corresponded with some of the data that I had seen on the computer, and I had gotten pretty concerned, and I felt like there might be criminal material here that needed to be put in the hands of the authorities.
I know your dad was in the military for right around 30 years. I think he was a colonel. You initially contacted your dad and asked him to sort of help you contact the FBI through the proper channels in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Was that successful? Did they take you seriously?
There are a few reasons that this reporter would highlight the fact that John Paul's father was a colonel and served 30 years in the military. It helps counter skepticism, and it also provides a validation of credibility and chain of trust. Therefore, highlighting these familial ties to a former military officer is used as a means to establish his credibility by implying that he comes from a background and family that understands duty, honor, and the importance of reporting malfeasance. This also shows the connection that he has to the military or law enforcement that might be used to underscore the notion that the repairman utilized a trusted chain of communication to report the evidence to the FBI. To ensure a chain of custody, media outlets, as we know, focus on these connections to craft a more compelling narrative around the story, which in this case is necessary because by drawing these connections, we can also imply bias. And this was a common theme by many media outlets.
Was that successful? Did they take you seriously?
At first, no. My father approached the FBI in Albuquerque, and they told him to get out of their office and to lawyer up. It took about a month for the FBI to reach back out to my father to get in contact with me.
When they approached me in November of 2019 to get a hold of me, they wanted to know what my concerns were, but they still were reluctant to take that laptop. And then finally in December of 2019, they came with a subpoena and took the laptop. So I was kind of reluctant, but then they gave me the subpoena, so I was optimistic.
December 2019. That's when the FBI obtained Hunter Biden's laptop. That's very important, because what you're about to see is that the 50 intelligence spies who lied, including Joe Biden, knew that the laptop was authentic.
You now to Newbury Report, where the Office of Celebrity Psychiatrist Keith Abloh was raided by the DEA.
Breaking right now at 6, a raid at the office of a former celebrity psychiatrist. Dr. Keith Abloh has faced several malpractice lawsuits in the past. NBC 10's Malcolm Johnson joins us live from Newbury Report with these new developments. Malcolm?
Good evening, JC. This is a development and a raid that took place by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. It all happened earlier this morning, going down right here at Dr. Abloh's office. Let's take a look at a photo that we've got sent in from an eyewitness earlier this morning. In it, you can see several unmarked vehicles parked just outside of the office, which is here on Water Street. This is where officials removed belongings from inside the office.
The DEA's notable raid on the psychiatrist's premises unfolded.
A male, a public person, and a Trump supporter. And so am I surprised? Yeah. But shocked? No.
Let's not forget, Keith Abloh was the psychiatrist of Hunter Biden. When I went looking for him to find out where's Hunter, I found him in the same place where his psychiatrist, Keith Ablow, would treat him. He was on Plum Island in Massachusetts. In the tumultuous throes of March 2020, as the world grappled with the unprecedented and unexpected cascades of what COVID brought, and countries commenced stringent lockdowns, as an investigative journalist, I continued plowing through digital alleys and obscure websites for information to see how they were going to stop the elections of 2020, aside from the lockdowns. Open source intelligence indicated that there were weird groups like Black Lives Matter, the Sunrise Movement, Momentum, DC Underground, and Antifa.
And Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
What we have to realize in other countries, there's these amazing models of organization, of ways of organizing that are just give us a whole insight into different ways of thinking about social movements, thinking about how we could win. And OPPOR is one of them. This little raggedy student group that had no money went up against one of the most powerful dictators in the world and won. These people trained people over a week in strategy and the elements of how movements work and the tools and skills. I mean, imagine if Bernie Sanders trained 40,000 or 100,000 people in a training that lasted an entire week in the basics of how to overthrow the government, in a positive way. I mean, through a democratic change.
And I found myself in an obscure website called Black Planet because I anticipated possible upcoming actions and strategies amidst the emerging global crisis. Now, Black Planet traditionally is an online arena fostering African American connections and had conveniently become a hotbed of cryptic dialogues and file sharing that belied its overt social purposes. I expected no less to find federal agents in there, because if I had the intelligence that they were planning something, I'm pretty sure that they did. I'm just an investigative journalist. But it was in this digital enclave that I inadvertently stumbled upon a conversation, buried amidst casual discourses, yet pulsating with an undercurrent of clandestine significance. The participants veiled behind layers of digital anonymity seemed to be of a professional cadre, typically associated with intelligence operations, possibly FBI or other covert entities. They were exchanging files in a way that I recognize from my past life as a private intelligence contractor. Driven by my insatiable curiosity, I discreetly secured several of these files, relegating them to the depths of my digital repositories for subsequent scrutiny. It was at the end of March of 2020 that I would go through my standby file. And those digital troves that I had obtained from that odd conversation and exchange on Black Planet, I revisited. The magnitude of my discovery became palpable in April, revealing a kaleidoscope of emails, transaction records, images, and text communications purportedly affiliated with the former vice president's son. The materials seemed to weave a narrative of financial machinations, subtly obscured behind the facade of legitimate enterprises. But I only had a few. When I realized what I had in my possession in April, I had to think on my feet and figure out how I could make this public without drawing too much attention. Therefore, I used a title talking about Senator Hoeven, but mentioning the former vice president, to examine the intricate nesting doll-like company activities of Hoeven, but making the simile to the same exact thing I had in my possession about the former vice president's son. And we all know these babushka-type companies are commonly employed to veil cash flows, ownership, and notably, to navigate around tax obligations. Now, one must have to pause and think, how are those available if John Paul Isaac did not communicate with Mayor Rudy Giuliani's lawyer, Bob Costello, until later, months later, after I had the possession of those documents? As I explained, I had multiple profiles on Black Planet, but that was abruptly curtailed. One by one, cryptic notices were hinting at an FBI inquiry, veiled by digital anonymity, of course. My account, despite being an instrumental tool in unraveling concealed political financial dealings and understanding the intricate works of these factions and affinity groups that have been organizing protest throughout all of 2020 and are continuing to do so, were successful because I evaded personal attribution and therefore a subpoena provided to the company to subpoena anything that I had to be proven that it was mine first. And that hasn't happened. In fact, they have asked me to produce identification and self-identify as account, despite being an instrumental tool in unraveling concealed political financial dealings and understanding the intricate works of these factions and affinity groups that have been organizing protest throughout all of 2020 and are continuing to do so, were successful because I evaded personal attribution and therefore a subpoena provided to the company to subpoena anything that I had to be proven that it was mine first. And that hasn't happened. In fact, they have asked me to produce identification and self-identify as owner of accounts. So allow me to show you one that did not get the files. Therefore, the FBI knew that everything that I've been saying is correct. Earlier, I mentioned that the FBI had retrieved a second laptop, therefore confirming that there was a first that was returned to the Bidens. Well, I'll suggest another alternative and plausible supposition that the returned laptop, while outwardly mimicking the original, is implanted with monitoring software transformed into a digital Trojan horse of all sorts. This would grant investigators a clandestine observation window into the activities of the now President of the United States, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden, revealing further illicit activities or connections. But that's just a theory. What do I know? Hold that thought.
I saw material of a very personal nature. I don't want to obviously go into it. I don't feel comfortable about talking about the personal stuff. I also saw files related to financing and other documents that just raised some red flags.
I definitely had a legitimate concern for national security, and that's why I went to the FBI.
Corrupt Ukrainians.
Ukrainian authorities. Ukraine.
Ukraine.
Donald Trump is being impeached, and for some reason, it's all about this place, Ukraine. And it all begins with a phone call. What was President Trump asking for in that phone call last July? Well, he referred to two allegations and asked Zelensky to investigate both. One, that Ukraine had somehow meddled in America's 2016 presidential election, and two, Joe Biden had abused his own political influence to prevent an investigation into his son's business interests in Ukraine.
Today, the president was his bullish self, but then again, when isn't he? The Democratic leadership seem to think that this time it is different. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has started a process that many in her party wanted to see happen months ago.
In late 2019 and early 2020, the political landscape was dominated by the Democrat-controlled House, fervently trying to stop President Trump's investigation into potential corruption involving the United States and Ukraine.
The scandal that's triggered this impeachment inquiry process dates back to a phone conversation on the 25th of July between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. A US intelligence advisor inside the White House who was, as part of his duties, listening in on the call, was so alarmed by what he heard that he raised a formal complaint with his superiors. This is what's known as the whistleblower complaint.
Our elusive whistleblower is more akin to a wiretap than a person. Who needs a whistleblower when you've got supersonic ears? Or they'd like us to believe it.
Well, Ambassador Sondland's phone was not on speakerphone. I could hear the president's voice through the earpiece of the phone. Ambassador Sondland replied, yes, he was in Ukraine, and went on to state that President Zelensky, quote, loves your ass. I then heard President Trump ask, so he's going to do the investigation. Ambassador Sondland replied that he's going to do it.
There are multiple reports, Heather, that Donald Trump personally ordered the withholding of military aid to Ukraine, and that happened in the week before he had that key phone call with the newly elected president of Ukraine.
And what was said on the phone call?
I'd like you to do us a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot, and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened with this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. There were a lot of things that went on, the whole situation. I think you're surrounding yourself with some of the same people. I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like you to get to the bottom of it.
Pressure from President Trump to investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden.
Nobody pushed me.
During the unfounded Ukraine impeachment proceedings, some managed to successfully advocate for testimonies from ambassadors who had raised concern about Hunter Biden's association with Burisma.
Given Hunter Biden's role in Burisma's board of directors, at some point you testified in your deposition that you expressed some concern to the vice president's office. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Freedom of Information Act requests have unveiled significant apprehension within the State Department when the Atlantic Council forged a partnership with Burisma and its affiliated ambassadors. These concerns were underscored by reports from journalists investigating money laundering tied to Ukrainian corruption.
I sense that elation diminished yesterday when the president's defense team hit really hard. Burisma, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, they seem to make a lot of progress yesterday. And if they have to bring Hunter, the Democrats do, for John Bolton.
Should the trial be used as a vehicle to smear his opponent? Is that the purpose of a Senate trial, or is it to get to the truth? Because if it's to get to the truth, Hunter Biden can't tell us anything about the withholding of the military funding. Hunter Biden can't tell us why the president wouldn't let the president of Ukraine into the Oval Office.
Adam Schiff has a clear conflict of interest in opposing any investigation into Ukrainian ties. Given his financial backing from Ukrainian oligarchs and questionable Ukrainian blimp manufacturers who receive millions in congressional funding for mere conceptualization without delivering any tangible solutions. It's crucial to highlight the incongruity of the Obama administration assigning one of Adam Schiff's biggest donors Igor Pasternak, a blimp manufacturer, the task of producing weapons for Ukrainians. This appears to be a predestined failure, a cleverly orchestrated scheme designed to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars into their own pockets.
That brings our total of direct aid to almost $760 million in direct assistance in addition to loan guarantees since this crisis broke out. And that is not the end of what we're prepared to do if you keep moving. But for Ukraine to continue to make progress and to keep the support of the international community, you have to do more as well. The big part of moving forward with your IMF program. It requires difficult reforms, and they are difficult. Our team, our others, to convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
But then when that laptop failed to materialize during the impeachment trial, I realized that the FBI cared more about protecting the Bidens than they cared about the truth or protecting me, for that matter.
MacIsaac says he turned the laptop over to the FBI, but after 8 months of waiting in 2020 during the presidential campaign, he approached Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani.
I had to do something with it because, A, I'm a Boy Scout, and when you see criminality, you should be able to take it to the authorities.
But what did John Paul MacIsaac see?
Despite last-minute attempts by European leaders at the summit in Lithuania to get him to change his mind, Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych refused to sign up to the free trade deal on offer.
There are reasons why the agreement wasn't signed. The European Union refused to make any concessions to our demands, and we don't want to be brought to our knees. We are a proud people.
We need to finish our own reforms first, and only then can we integrate into Europe and match their standards.
Opinions were sharply divided. One faction passionately championed Ukraine's integration into the EU, while the other favored coming under the jurisdiction of the Russian Federation.
Почему так мало людей? Вот в 5-миллионном городе вот сюда вот пришли только вот полсотни человек. Где Мустафа? Кто бачит? Мустафа, поджигай. Доброго дня. Річ у тому, що я говорю, вони ще не.
Хоча мене немає в Фейсбуці і в жодній соцмережі. Але на Майдані я з'явився.
In Kyiv, Ukraine, thousands of people marched on Sunday to protest the failure of an association agreement between the European Union and Ukraine. There were also reports that the government was busing in paid coal miners, senior citizens, and fighters known locally as Titushki.
While the term Titushki refers to pro-Russian agitators, it's important to note that there were also pro-EU agitators, financed by USAID, open societies, other NGOs, and foreign government entities.
At 4 o'clock in the morning, the Siloviki cracked down on the Euromaidan protesters. Several hundred people were demonstrating by the Independence Monument at that time. Many of them were students. On the day after the November crackdown, hundreds of thousands of people across the country rose up against the violence.
Protesters like self-defense volunteer Alina says social media were the first to spread the word about the fighting. Serbian expat Žilko Marček says Facebook and similar Russian sites are key for following the fast-moving events.
We have had updates every 15 minutes.
В перших рядах стати чоловіків, а не жінок.
Послухайте, дівчата, розумієте, я не закриваю обличчя. Я це зробила, я...
Ми самі розберемося, ви провокатор, ми київляні, ми знаємо, що робити, до них дойде очі. Зафіксируйте, ви їх не зафіксували.
Чисто провокація. Ти звідки, яку організацію представляєш?
Без коментарів.
Бочик, які були на Майдані, які купили Майдан і вигнали звідти мирних протестуючих.
Привіт, Ukraine! This is your moment.
The security service of Ukraine had evidence that on that night, Lovochkin was in contact with opposition leader Yatsenyuk, where they discussed the clearing of Maidan. News media reported that the riot police cruelly attacked the students peacefully sleeping in their tents. But scenes from the event seem to tell a different story. It appears that the protesters were waiting for the police. Additionally, there were dozens of journalists and cameramen from all the new public TV news outlets prepared to cover the events. And most ominously, a group of well-trained young men arrived to Maidan almost simultaneously with the riot police.
Protesters marched amidst a river of torches and signs saying Ukraine above all else.
Fireworks, Molotov cocktails, man firing a shotgun. We don't know what he was using for ammunition.
Good morning, everybody. I wanted to provide an update on the situation in Ukraine and the steps that the United States is taking in response. I also hope that the IMF moves swiftly to provide a significant package of support for Ukrainians as they pursue reforms. The world should support the people of Ukraine as they move to elections in May. That's the path of de-escalation. Today, once again, I'm calling on Congress to follow up on these words with action, specifically to support the IMF's capacity to lend resources to Ukraine and to provide American assistance for the Ukrainian government so that they can weather this storm and stabilize their economy, make needed reforms, deliver for their people, all of which will provide a smoother pathway for the elections that have already been scheduled in May.
During this period, Hunter Biden's associate, Devon Archer, was actively exploring potential opportunities within Ukraine's energy sector. His search led him to Burisma, a prominent energy company. Upon conducting his due diligence, Archer observed that Mykola Zlochevsky, the sole remaining co-founder of Burisma, had a reputation that was less than stellar, with numerous indications suggesting involvement in questionable activities.
Таким невеликим складом родини. Дружину і старшу доньку залишили вдома.
Со мной только младшая и мой отец.
April 12th, Hunter Biden sent an email to Devon Archer letting him know his father is headed to Ukraine, then sending him outlining information and points of discussion. Poroshenko appears to be the likely next president. The IMF loan guarantees will allow the Ukrainians to weather the economic impact, but the required reforms to the Ukrainian public subsidies will weaken the new president. There will be enormous pressure on Burisma to lower prices for the national good. Even if the company takes a hit in profits, it would seem imprudent to raise prices in convert with Russia price gouging. Burisma has an opportunity here to play the hero if it ignores the artificial market value of their product and plays to the national interest. The announcement of my guy's upcoming travels should be categorized as part of our advice and thinking, but what he will say and do is out of our hands. What does that mean? He means that because Barack Hussein Obama had claimed that he's sending his vice president to Ukraine, that announcement of his father's upcoming travels should be characterized as part of their advice and thinking. But they can't control what he's going to say. In other words, it could be a really good thing, or it could end up creating too great of an expectation. We need to temper expectation regarding that visit. The contract should begin now, not after the upcoming visit of my guy. That should include a retainer in the range of $25,000 per month, with additional fees where appropriate for more in-depth work. To go to BSF for our protection. Complete, separate from our respective deals, board participation. In other words, President Barack Hussein Obama appoints Joe Biden as his envoy to Ukraine. His son uses that as leverage to make even more money, knowing that his father will help him, but doesn't want to bloat the expectations of such. And let's not forget, he also told him to buy a burner phone from a 7-Eleven tomorrow, and that he will do the same.
Essential in our view that the Congress, upon return, act very quickly to pass legislation that you've seen in the Senate that would authorize the provision of loan guarantees in direct bilateral assistance, but also provide the quota reforms, the so-called quota reforms to the IMF that would allow the IMF to provide maximum assistance as part of its package to Ukraine. So we look forward to Congress taking action on that. That is something that Congress can do concretely to assist Ukraine.
The economic situation in Ukraine has become more challenging, not less. And that's why I'm very proud that not only as critical members of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, we are working with the Prime Minister and his team in a package that can help to institute necessary reforms inside of the Ukraine, but also help to stabilize the situation so that people feel confident that in their daily lives they can meet their basic necessities. We're also asking Congress to act promptly to deliver on an aid package, including a $1 billion loan guarantee that can help smooth the path for reform inside of Ukraine and give the Prime Minister and his government the capacity to do what they need to do as they are also organizing an election process.
Petro Poroshenko, age 48, children 4, married. Fortune, roughly €1 billion. Nickname, King of Chocolate. His mission, win Ukraine's presidential election. A discreet figure during the Ukrainian uprising that ended the last presidency, Poroshenko has quite a few of his pro-Europe countrymen and women convinced that he is worthy. The self-made billionaire has had his trade run-ins with the Russian government. In a country where business elites are often seen as corrupt, the presidential candidate has called corruption the top priority for a modern Ukraine.
Exit polls give him well over the crucial figure of 50%. Petro Poroshenko has promised to reform the economy and fight corruption. His role in the protests against the former regime give him credibility.
Well, it is a great pleasure to welcome President Poroshenko to the Oval Office. He and I have been working together a lot over the last several months, and we have consistently said that not only do we support Ukraine's sovereignty and independence in words, but we've also been supporting it in deeds. And at the Wales Summit, you saw all 28 NATO countries recommit themselves to the NATO-Ukraine partnership and commit to assisting Ukraine in its security concerns. We have provided significant financial assistance to help Ukraine bridge this period of transition from the old ways of doing things to a new and more modern economy, and that includes a $1 billion loan guarantee from the United States, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars that we've provided in assistance.
All these people, every one of them, gave their life for freedom. Every single one of these people here, ordinary Ukrainians. This government has an obligation to not let this fail this time. The Orange Revolution failed. What happened in the Maidan and up on this hill can't fail. But for Ukraine to continue to make progress and to keep the support of the international community, you have to do more as well. The big part of moving forward with your IMF program. It requires difficult reforms, and they are difficult.
Obama and Biden vigorously advocated for the establishment of a reform government in Ukraine, a nation grappling with an economic crisis amidst the upheaval of its manufactured revolution. Essentially, Ukraine found itself in a precarious position where it had to acquiesce to the demands and conditions set forth by the U.S., in order to navigate and emerge intact from the revolutionary turmoil it was experiencing.
And violence in the country's east. Ukraine's central bank has lowered the local currency to its lowest level in Ukraine's history. The bank announced that the exchange rate of the Ukrainian hryvnia will drop to 13 per dollar in order to control inflation. A 280-truck convoy carrying humanitarian supplies from Russia to eastern Ukraine will reach the border today, but the Ukrainian government has said it will not allow the supplies to pass into its territory.
The vice president met with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and President Poroshenko to discuss topics like Ukraine's reform agenda and energy security.
The path to renewed prosperity runs through the International Monetary Fund, which is offering now a way out of the current crisis.
As evident from Hunter Biden's earlier emails, he believed his recently affiliated company was strategically positioned to benefit from the IMF loan that his father, Vice President Joe Biden, was advocating for. Recognizing this opportunity, he actively participated, joining discussions with IMF bank representatives. He joined a business forward call for the White House Business Council with the Department of Treasury's Assistant Secretary for Legislative Affairs, Alistair Fitzpaine, and Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Monetary and Financial Policy, the IMF policy, Mark Sobel, to discuss the ongoing situation in Ukraine, including proposals to help the Ukrainian government restore financial stability and move forward IMF quota reforms. April 15, 2014, Vadim sends an email to Devon Archer, Hunter Biden's associate. Dear Devon, following the decision of Hunter Biden to become a director of Burisma Holding Limited, I am kindly providing you with the draft set of documents to be verified and signed by Mr. Biden. Hunter Biden says, okay, I think Burisma is prepared for an engagement fee in the $100,000 range, as their initial needs would most likely be limited to crisis/government team. April 22nd, 2014, Hunter Biden sends an email to Devon Archer. You should send to Vadim. Makes it look like we're adding value. What is he referring to? He's referring to the following report. Mr. Biden spoke of the humiliating threats faced by Ukraine and said the United States was ready to assist. But he also stressed that Ukraine needed to put its own house in order, calling on it to fight the cancer of corruption that is endemic in your system right now, and to reduce its crippling dependence on Russia for supplies of natural gas. Imagine where you'd be today if you were able to tell Russia, keep your gas. It would be a very different world you'd be facing today, Mr. Biden told Ukrainian legislators. It takes some difficult decisions, but it's collectively within your power and the power of Europe and the United States, and we stand ready to assist you in reaching that. Well, because then Burisma would be completely in charge of energy in Ukraine, making the Bidens and the Obama-Biden administration very rich. May 12, 2014, Vadim Bozarsky emails Hunter and Devon. These so-called unofficial communications would entail blackmailing. Business of NZ would be stopped, destroyed, etc. NZ stands for Nikolai Zlochevsky, even though his name is really Mikola, so he just anglified it to Nikola. We urgently need your advice on how you could use your influence to convey a message or signal, etc., to stop what we consider to be politically motivated action, bearing in mind the following. Influence? You mean his guy going to Ukraine? Influence. You mean the vice president's son leveraging his father's influence? Dear Sebastian, please let me know how many Secret Service officers will be joining us for a Kazakhstan trip, so that we can arrange an appropriate charter. Best regards, Vadim. Sebastian was coordinating Secret Service agents for Hunter. Hunter tells him, I've chosen to carry on from Paris without the Secret Service. They're not happy about it, but it seemed far too complicated and unnecessary. He ditched Secret Service in Paris. April 17, 2015. Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to DC and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. It's really an honor and a pleasure. As we spoke yesterday evening, would be great to meet today for a quick coffee. What do you think? I could come to your office somewhere around noon or so, before or on my way to the airport. Any names of top U.S. officials here in Ukraine? For instance, U.S. Ambassador, Ukrainian officials, the President of Ukraine, Chief of Staff, Prosecutor General, as key targets for improving Nikolai's case in his situation in Ukraine. Any names of top U.S. officials here in Ukraine? Prosecutor General, key targets for improving Nikolai's case in his situation in Ukraine.
I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to the press conference. I said, no, I'm not going to, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Ukrainian Prosecutor General Viktor Shokin was removed from his position in March of 2016.
A BBC investigation revealed evidence that on February 20th, armed protesters may have fired first on the police, provoking their deadly response. What is your assessment of what occurred and who fired first? And a final question, sir. The public seems to have very little faith that those responsible will be brought to justice and question whether Ukraine's corrupted justice system can become independent under the new government. What do you say to them? Thank you.
Corruption has become unacceptable for ordinary Ukrainians, and the battle against it is a top priority. Now, the civil society, government, experts, all of us have a chance to move Ukraine from the revolution of dignity through reforms to the country of dignity and victory.
One of their main grievances was corruption. This has long been endemic in the country. Artem Sitnik was appointed to head up and build Ukraine's new anti-corruption bureau in April 2015.
In 2016, President Barack Hussein Obama established the position of the Inspector General of the NSA to be presidentially appointed. And in an unprecedented move, during the presidential transition period, nominated Robert Storch for the role. However, Storch was not confirmed until December 2017 by voice vote. It is important to note that many journalists had observed that the U.S.-led anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine appeared to be controlled by the United States of America rather than Ukraine. This includes the involvement of George Kent, who played a pivotal role in bringing Robert Storch, the now IG of the DoD, overseeing Ukrainian funds, the previous IG of the NSA, to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, NABU, of Ukraine.
Your documents, you demonstrated your knowledge of the principles and methods of audits. So maybe you would like to give us a brief overview of your activity, and please be aware that you are broadcast live through the internet.
Of course. From 2007 to 2009, Robert Storch's wife, Sarah Lord, was dispatched by the Department of Justice to Ukraine with the mission of investigating corruption. With the Storches deeply involved in Ukraine's anti-corruption investigations and their ties directly to the Obama-Biden administration, it appears as though key players in Ukraine's foreign policy are being kept all in the family. And by all in the family, I'm trying to underscore the purported racketeering activities associated with the Obama Biden administration, creating a close-knit circle of influence over Ukraine's political landscape.
But then when that laptop failed to materialize during the impeachment trial, I realized that the FBI cared more about protecting the Bidens than they cared about the truth or protecting me for that matter.
McIsaac says he turned the laptop over to the FBI, but after 8 months of waiting in 2020 during the presidential campaign, he approached Donald Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani.
I had to do something with it because, A, I'm a Boy Scout, and when you see criminality, you should be able to take it to the authorities.
With the backup copy of the laptop left untouched, John Paul McIsaac felt a growing sense of frustration over the FBI's failure to unveil Joe Biden's questionable dealings in Ukraine during the impeachment trial. Determined to do the right thing, he took it upon himself to share the exculpatory evidence with President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, successfully doing so on August 28, 2020. From that point on, the information transitioned from John Paul's possession into the capable hands of Rudy Giuliani and Bob Costello, subsequently opening the door for journalists to delve into and scrutinize the story. This provided a striking glimpse into the intricate dynamics of Hunter and Joe Biden's interactions with Ukraine. John Paul McIsaac felt a wave of relief that the abandoned laptop and its contents were finally being given the serious attention that they warranted. However, not everyone shared his sentiment.
Yeah, we need to talk about it, Nicole. This looks like Russian intelligence. This walks like Russian intelligence. This talks like Russian intelligence.
Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Does it surprise you at all that this information Rudy Giuliani is peddling very well could be connected to some sort of Russian government disinformation campaign?
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now, that they've been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son. And, you know, the idea that the president, that the White House counsel and others were made aware that Giuliani was being used by Russian intelligence and using Russian intelligence in the sense of meeting with an agent of the Kremlin and pushing out this Kremlin false narrative. The idea that they were knowing and still on the floor of the Senate during the impeachment trial, pushing this Kremlin narrative is pretty breathtaking. But I guess at this point we can't be shocked by anything this administration does, no matter how craven. But clearly the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin, and the president is only too happy to have Kremlin help in trying to amplify it.
I came out at that time after Adam Schiff came out with a false political narrative about this being Russian disinformation when there was absolutely no intelligence to support that. And it shouldn't surprise us. That's what Adam Schiff does as a politician. But to your point, to have 50 former Obama, Clinton, Biden national security officials come out after the director of national intelligence says that this is not true, and promote a false narrative to protect Joe Biden and try and influence the outcome of the election, you know, that is the definition of politicizing intelligence.
And intelligence committees, former CIA Deputy Director Michael Morell told congressional investigators the days after the laptop story, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, then a Biden campaign advisor, reached out to Morell and set in motion the events that led to the intelligence official's public statement.
Within days of the laptop story emerging, the FBI verified that the laptop they obtained from John Paul McIsaac was involved in a money laundering investigation. Shortly thereafter, the DA announced they had seized a laptop from Keith Abloh. But had the FBI abandoned John Paul? Well, there are some not-so-subtle signs they were working in the background quietly, such as collecting sources in June 2020, meeting with Zlochevsky and discussing him paying off the Bidens around Shokin's investigation, or August 31st, 2020, when the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs interviewed a key character out of the laptop. Like Sally Painter, a long-standing associate of Hunter Biden, played a crucial role in facilitating connections between Burisma and the Ukrainian U.S. government, all while gathering intelligence for Hunter Biden and Burisma. Ohio, the heart of it all. I actually live across the street from where the raid of the oligarch, co-owner of Privatbank, was raided. I got to see firsthand perspective of events unfolding before and after the raid. Considering Rob Portman chose not to seek re-election, and Sally Painter facing, at the very least, potential FARA violations, Ukrainian banks operating under the NCAU banner but prohibiting U.S. citizens from opening up bank accounts. The intricacies are many. These subjects will shape the narrative of the upcoming episode titled FARA and Meddling, brought to you by Hunter Biden's laptop.
I just moved to the neighborhood and I wanted to look into opening up a checking account.
The national base account is Ukrainian bank. We don't open account for Americans.
All right. I hope you all enjoyed episode 1 and the prologue. I think it was almost imperative for me to do a prologue for the first episode because people need to understand the actual dynamics of Ukraine. And as someone, I even put this on my affidavit for elections, that assisted in the Ukrainian elections in 2014, I may actually know what I'm talking about. Now, episode 2 is going to be very interesting because there are things that, you may be seeing in the laptop, but not making much sense of it. It's kind of like what I told Garrett. You're not corrupt enough. I am a swamp creature. I can help. So as you can see, the media and our Congress have been trying to demonstrate that Hunter Biden's businesses or his qualifications were just that, influence peddling. Well, if this docu episode did not make that case, I don't know what can. Because we do understand Hunter's not qualified to be on the board. But then with the same coin, most of the people you get your news with aren't qualified either. So there you go. It's called influence peddling. On that note, tomorrow at 10 a.m. I will be premiering it just on YouTube. I've uploaded it. Hopefully they won't take it out. That way it's consistent and there is no cutting off of my internet in the middle of my stream, which was fascinating. I guess admitting that I had an account, I didn't show which account obtained the files. I showed one that didn't, was a trigger enough. But for those of you on locals, I'm uploading the full and unfettered episode. And hopefully by the end of next week, we'll have episode 2 locked and loaded. God bless. And on that note, I think there's a song we need to play, but I have to get rid of